Network Automation Nerds podcast. Hello, and welcome to Network Automation Nerds podcast, a podcast about network automation, network engineering, Python, and a whole lot of technology topics. I'm your host, Eric Cho. Today on the show, we'll be talking to Julio Perez. So Julio recently completed a 6-part blog post on building network CI/CD pipeline. I really enjoy reading them. I thought they really kicked butt, and I certainly learned a lot from those blog posts and a lot of inspiration from Julio. So I'm super excited to have Julio on the show today. I know we'll have a great time chatting. So let's dive right in. Hi, Julio. How are you?
I'm good, Eric. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. This is huge. When I'm doing something like this, I feel like I'm in the room with some giants. So I really do appreciate it. So, and thank you, and hello to the community.
No giants here. I'm 5'9", so purely like I think if you take the average American, it's like I'm right down the middle. So thanks for the kind words. You've always been very active on social media, active in sharing your thoughts and being encouraging, rather supportive. So I should be the one thanking you for being on the show.
No, awesome. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you. And that's just my way of giving back to the community. So the community's already given me so much. So even this little 6-part blog series is just a little bit of giving back.
It's not a little bit, man. 6 parts. And if you look, they're like mini series, right? So like part 3, that's like 1,500 words, which is typically like half of a chapter, right? So if you combine all of them, it's actually like 3 chapters of a regular book size, probably.
You'd be surprised. The first 3 parts I think were written in like one day.
Oh, really? Wow.
I think my wife and I were heading to a vacation in Mexico, and we always packed the night before, and I was banging away at the keys trying to get as many parts as humanly possible, because where we were going I was not going to have any network connection, so I really wanted to get as many as I could out. So yeah, the first 3 parts, if you notice their publication date, it's the same day for all 3 of them.
Yeah, I did notice that. It's October 20th, and so it was just like bam bam bam. It's like, okay, that's awesome. No, it's like when you're facing like a deadline, it's like when you're just being really productive.
Yeah, it was a self-imposed deadline, because I could have probably just put the first part, but I didn't want to leave people hanging for a couple weeks, and maybe they installed Docker and then they were just lost, and then they had nowhere to go from there. So I didn't want to leave anyone hanging.
Right. You're like your ears will be really like itchy. It's like, darn that Julio. He led me on and he just took off. No, but it's cool. Yeah, no, I did notice the first 3 parts were on the same date, and you went all the way to containers. And then on the 4th part, well, we'll get into it. So
sure.
Before we get into all the CI/CD goodness, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you get into technology? How did you get into networking?
Yeah, well, Julio Perez. I'm from the Pacific Northwest. The same as you, I believe.
Yep.
My start in networking was, I don't know if it was normal or not normal, but when I was young, I was that out of all the kids, I was assigned to fix the electronics. The internet wasn't working. I was the one troubleshooting. Hooking up the VCR, just something, just anything that kind of had to do with tech. Not necessarily computers. We didn't really have computers in the house at all.
Yeah, right.
But believe it or not, in high school, I was actually in school to sort of go into architecture. I was taking like computer aided drafting and design. So it was nothing to do with tech. We didn't have like a computer science courses or anything like that.
Right.
That was, and then shortly after, my parents kind of asked, after that phase of like, what do you want to do with your future? And I kind of sort of haphazardly kind of just mentioned, I think the Air Force would be pretty cool. And and sort of that, I don't know if I sort of planted that seed in my mind, but I just kept looking into it. And I was always in a tech, here and there, gaming and whatnot. But
sure,
I started looking into it and just looking at different branches. And I noticed that the Air Force had a lot of, IT centric roles that sort of I thought I would be interested in, or I could sort of make a career out of it.
Right.
I did the recruiter thing, and then eventually, went into the military as, believe it or not, there's a thing called open electrical, which means you could be assigned to pretty much any role that they deem sort of in the electrical category. But the role I wanted to get was something called cyber transport systems, which is
Yeah.
sort of network tech, network support, routing and switching, specific role. And there's a bunch of other roles. But then in basic training, eventually, there's a day where you walk into a room, you get your paperwork, and I opened a
Yeah.
letter and it said cyber transport, and I was like, oh my
Oh,
gosh,
wow.
I got what it could have been totally different. Maybe I wouldn't have written that blog series if I didn't get chosen to have that role. But yeah, after that, it just kind of kicked off from there. After basic, you kind of go to your technical school where they kind of teach you sort of CCNA level topics and
Hmm.
a little bit of military specific things sprinkled in, and then you get assigned to your base. And from there, it was either doing base communications, which is something like supporting a campus network. You can kind of make the connections there as far as hardware and configuring switches and trouble tickets, kind of like daily support.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, did that for 6 years. Loved it. Loved the military. Traveled a lot, which is great. And I can pause there if you want to sort of interject, or I can keep going.
Oh, no, no. I mean, no, no, it's cool, right? So you mentioned that kind of changed the trajectory of your career, like the fact that you got into, I don't know, I want to call it space networking, right? So so
Yeah,
you
they,
got
they always
into
they always give you an action title, and my action title was cyber transport systems. That was
nice.
my role. But yeah, eventually that must come to an end. So I did that for 6 years, and
Hmm.
uh, eventually making that transition from a military career to a civilian career. I was fortunate that I got hired on by an awesome employer to kind of make that transition. At the time,
Hmm.
they were actually hiring junior network engineers. So when I was
Hmm.
researching what fields could I go into, where do my skills translate, a lot
Right.
of sort of what network engineering or network admins kind of do kind of aligned to what I was doing in the military. So I figured this is great. I should go for this. Eventually,
Yeah.
got hired.
Hmm.
Specifically, that was an amazing role for me to land in as a junior engineer, just because I had chances to fail, to learn, to grow into a position like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was kind of been my journey to kind of getting into network engineering.
Right. Did you go the certification route, or was it something that you just kind of didn't really care about?
While I was in the military or after.
Well, I guess either or both, right? So it
Yeah, I
sounded
think
like military was less relevant as far as the certification because you're just dealing with electronics. But you tell me.
I think I didn't get started. So when I got the role as a civilian, I was kind of more relying on the work I had done, my previous experience. I think I had Security Plus. I didn't have any Cisco certifications or
Right.
anything like that. It's just when I got that position, they were sort of being a junior engineer. They kind of expected to learn and study and whatnot, and they were very
Sure.
supportive of me going down sort of the certification track. I told them, hey,
Hmm.
the CCNA looks really interesting. I would love to go for that, and I had a lot of support there to make that happen, whether it's time or financially with that company, which is amazing. And then took it a step further to go the CCMP route, and then sure, again, right, it just kind of clicked, right, that the certification, the learning, the labbing, it just kind of took over. So that was a good like year or two of kind of in that phase of certifications, and then
Yeah.
yeah, shortly after the automation kind of walks in the door. So I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it at that.
Nice. Nice. So that's great, right? So you mentioned NP, and eventually I think you're branching out to different fields, and is that where you discovered automation? So how did that happen for you?
Yeah, great question. We actually had a senior engineer, I think in 2017, a senior network engineer. He presented Ansible to us, believe it or not. Yeah, 2017. He just kind of showed us a basic inventory file. And I think at the moment it was just doing a simple connection and maybe, like a hello world of Ansible essentially. But,
Yeah.
but to
Yeah.
me, coming from CLI, manual, copy paste on the keys, seeing that happen, I was kind of blown away. I was like, wow, that was really cool. And it just kind of kicked off from there of, researching Ansible. What does it do?
Yeah.
How to make it work? What can we automate? And then sort of our team wanted to automate kind of as much as we could to an extent, right? Things that would help the
Right.
business. It was a sportswear retailer.
Yep.
So initially it was mainly, can we automate our branch sites, our builds? We had sort of a process to build a branch location. It was fairly slow. a lot of
Right.
error, a lot of touch points.
Yeah.
I think they kind of saw that I was picking it up relatively quickly, and they kind of assigned me like, "Hey, can you try to automate some of these pieces?" And I kind of went all in. I wanted to automate switching, access points, configurations to like radius, authentication servers,
Yeah.
just every we use Netbox for inventory management. Even automating when someone builds a site, making sure it gets documented, like just the whole gambit of that piece. It kind of took over for me
Yeah.
eventually, just going down that route.
So you started with Ansible, and by the way, I think that's a very logical place to start automation because for remote sites, that is because it's self-contained and it has a clear, I guess, connection point back into the
Mhm.
mothership, right? So everything beyond that, you could just automate, and I think that's where we started automation initially at some of my previous employers is just
Mhm.
we did a lot of like fulfillment centers and
Yeah.
warehouses, you know?
Yeah, because there's pieces to the environment that are fairly static. They don't really change
Yeah,
much. But as
for
far as
sure.
branch sites, you're sort of building branch sites or closing branch sites kind of at a frequent clip. So that was
Right.
something that was it was very obvious that we could automate that process. And
Right.
in going through Ansible, it kind of teaches you, even though it's not going in depth with programming languages, you still get like variable assignments, for
Yep.
loops. Uh,
Yep.
you start building those connection points using Ansible, which I enjoyed. I'm still a fan of Ansible
Yeah.
to this day. So
Are you calling it a domain specific language?
yeah, yeah, I would say so. I know there's a lot of discussion, argument,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
have you, just about probably Ansible and maybe using DSLs.
Sure.
I think that it is really good as a starting point for sure, and it
Yeah.
obviously in server administration or server engineers. I mean, that's bread and butter. Uh, that's incredible. That's incredible. I think for network automation, they try to do a lot to sort of simplify the process.
Right.
But I think sometimes you kind of do. I think I've heard called like gymnastics. You're kind of doing gymnastics with Ansible, and it kind of makes it a little funky.
Yeah. Yeah. No, the reason I brought it up is I think all of us in the community sees it as a DSL, like domain specific language, because it got
Mhm.
variables, it got loops, and it got its own thing, right? Like you have to use in order to make it happy.
Mhm.
But there are engineers within Ansible, like they don't think that's the case, which have strong feelings stir up on social media, and we won't go into that. But
Yeah, no, and I'm more of a proponent. If it works for you, if it works for the team, like that's
right,
incredible. Like,
right,
go take off and do that.
right.
Yeah.
But it sounded like you used Ansible to begin with, but eventually, did you move on to something else and still use Ansible
Um,
for maybe some
no,
tasks?
no, for that role, it was mainly Ansible. Just
Yeah,
it was really any small use case we could find after sort of automating the branch deployments. It could be gathering data. It could be doing network backups. That was great. Yeah, so we had Ansible Tower.
yeah,
Server engineers are kind of using that for their deployments, kind of automating those pieces.
yeah,
It was still heavily used. I sort of started delving into Python more for sort of the flexibility, the power, the libraries that are built for it.
yeah,
So any from then on, any task that really requires some kind of automation, I would sort of choose just I want to use Python because I wanted to improve, I wanted to get better, and sort of
right,
having those real world scenarios to sort of use it kind of
yeah.
helped it click a little bit more. I got a long way to go. I still got a long way to go in Python for sure, but it's just kind of that whole like getting better, a little bit better every day. That's the kind of approach I'm taking with it.
Yeah, so I think so I talked to some of the people in Python community a lot. So Michael Kennedy in particular, so he actually puts in a very good analogy about how Python is very unique in the way that it's easy to get started, but like the ceiling is super high, right? It's not like toy language. It's like you can actually go very very far. And for me, after I don't know 6 7 years, I still haven't found that ceiling. It's
Yeah.
just you could just go really far. Whereas some of the other languages, especially for something that is domain specific, then you
Mhm.
hit that ceiling really really fast, right? So if you imagine like I don't know code.org, right? Like you could get up to speed really quick because it's made for kids, but you can hit that ceiling really quick. Like if you want to make an actual app, you can't make it with code.org. Whereas, Python, easy to get started, easy to move forward. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it kind of brings up a discussion of like how much Python, if we're just talking about Python, like how much Python should network
Sure,
engineers know. I've kind of seen that brought
sure,
up.
sure.
Um, I think you can do a lot with Python,
Hmm.
even knowing sort of like the foundational pieces, which I think
Of
make it really
course,
exciting for our career field.
right,
That's kind of why I got excited about using it. And it's just like the power is just incredible.
right. Yeah, so you don't have to be like core contributor to make use of it.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, definitely, definitely. No, even having a strong foundation, just the basics, I think you can go far, especially with good documentation and exploring tools. I think you can really build really cool things with even minimal interaction with the language.
Yeah, even if you don't use it, right? It's always, I mean, you could tell I'm biased. So take it with a grain of salt, right? But definitely even if you're not using the full, 100% capability, like it's good to know that there's no limit. There's no upper limit, right? You're
Yeah,
you're you're only limited by your own ambition and your time and energy to spend on it.
definitely. I think I kind of saw things like that in the pipeline, which kind of made me sort of hold the reins back on what to include, right?
Yeah.
I didn't want, like, I think I mentioned, like when there's too much sauce in what's going on, folks kind of just goes over their head. And I really wanted to avoid that, even for myself, just to keep everything kind of in order, right? Keep myself sane.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. No, but I don't know, man. You include, I don't know, probably 6 or 7 different pieces in your CI/CD pipeline, right? So I think this time is just as good as any to just dive into what you have on the blog post. I know we're on the podcast platform, but if you're on the YouTube video, you'll see I'm pulling up Julio's, and I'll include show notes, links for in the show notes for all of these, but I'll pull it up, and basically what Julio has is he has some sort of code base. It's being checked into GitHub, so that's one, right? And then he uses some sort of local persistent server. So in this case, it was ngrok for GitHub to get a callback on. He has some drone server. That's 3 components already. And then he uses Batfish for pre-checking, and then does actual deployment uses Nornir/Napalm, and then use SushiQ for post checking. So that's actually 4 or 5 or 6 different nice large components associated to it. And what I really enjoy, Julio, about what you said right in the beginning is, and then just throughout the 6-part series, is you mentioned you did not know a lot about many of these components, but you're happy to learn. And I think that joy of learning just kind of jumped out from your blog post.
Yeah, I think when I initially wrote this down, I think I was just on a notebook or something and writing down
Yeah.
the possible technologies. I mean, like unit testing. I mean, unit testing is not even a part of it, or test.
Right.
But
Do I hear part 7?
no. So it was interesting. Like the pipeline kind of came about just because, one, it was sort of a challenge to myself. Like we
Right.
had automation in my previous role and using Tower, but it wasn't kind of what you would think as a CI/CD pipeline. And I've
Right.
heard about it a lot. I've seen demonstrations, and I got to a point where I figured, can I make something like this work? Can I make it happen?
Right.
And what
Right.
technologies could be involved, or what are the major players, or not even major players, but what are some great tools out there that I could incorporate into this?
Right.
And sort of what you see is just things in that research phase or discovery. I just kind of thought, oh, this tool looks really great. Let me try to use it. And it's something I hadn't used before. I made the example of like drone, but beforehand I had never used drone for anything. We had used
Right.
Azure DevOps in my previous role and some other tools, but never drone. So it was kind of like, one, I can learn, and then I
Hmm.
could show people how to make it work, essentially, almost kind of like a how-to guide, essentially. I
Sure.
mean, if you kind of follow the post, you can kind of do it that way. But
Yep.
also maybe any roadblocks I run into, maybe I can help the next person not run into the same roadblocks, and they could do it that much faster or that much better.
Hmm.
That kind of excited me to make it happen. And that's,
Right.
why the 3 blog posts came out in one day. I really wanted to get this information out for everyone. Just, use it, enjoy it, build your own, make it better, whatever you want to do with it. And
Yeah.
any piece in there, and we can go into each individual piece, but any piece in there for the most part could really be substituted with anything that someone out there is comfortable with. If you're not using GitHub, that's fine. You could use your
Yeah.
own thing. If you're not using Drone, using a different tool for that, great. You don't have to use Batfish. You can use your own. You can build your own test, that kind of thing. So any piece in there really could. Folks can kind of pick and choose, use it all, whatever. For me, it was a
Yeah.
discovery phase, but also sort of, can I learn this? Can I show people what I kind of experienced in the process?
Yeah. So I think that's awesome that you said that, because I think what's lacking for a lot of people is just this lack of confidence that you could overcome difficulties, right? So they will
Yeah.
look at it and say, "Oh, these are new pieces, and I don't really know these, so I want to go back to what I think it's safe. Maybe the CLI, maybe something the vendor sells you that this is scoped, and there's something you could point to." Versus all these open source projects, it's like nobody has your back 100%. You guys should rely on your own initiative to get through that, and that's what you did as well.
I did try to. I tried to keep it as simple as humanly possible. I try to
Hmm.
do my absolute best because I've been a part of trying to get something to work or standing something up, and either the documentation is just either not there, or it just
Right.
for some reason just something's not working, and the roadblocks folks can run into, it could make you stop, right then and there. You just kind of lose hope in the tooling or maybe your idea. So I really tried to push through if I did hit anything, and it was pretty minimal if I hit
Right.
any obstacles.
Right.
But yeah, it's just I want to show individuals that something can be totally new, but just a little bit of perseverance and just making sure you read maybe good documentation, right? You
Hmm.
can push through and you can really build really fascinating things. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I think that's a theme, I think, with throughout your writing, and especially in this blog post. It's like you're not afraid to show like the hundreds of times that you've tried, right? And so that's I think that's valid, and people could really use that. It's just like, okay,
Mhm.
so you see the final product, but that's like day 100, right? And that's the
Yeah,
same thing with me.
I think
Yeah,
that's
go
what
ahead.
John Capobianco called that's the magic of TV. I think that's what he said in the previous pod, or it's the magic of television or something. And yeah, I just wanted to show folks that there is no magic. There's a lot of failure when learning these tools. Whether on user error or maybe error on something else. But yeah, we all run into errors. It's totally fine.
Yeah, so it's like you said, right? Like you either solve that problem, or you make a serious enough dent so that the next guy, or maybe that next guy is you 2 weeks from today or a month
Mhm.
from today, you could pick it up, and you at least this route didn't work. And that's actually what I try to do as well with all of the content I create, is just make a serious effort. And even if it doesn't work, this route doesn't work, so you share it out, and then as a team, all of us could benefit from it. And maybe the next guy will be able to solve this for all of us.
Yeah, I think there's a thought of trying to contribute and trying to better the community or uplift all of us, whether that's with your writing and your books or my simple blog posts. Adding that to the community, just imagine the wrinkle effect of how much better we will all be, with either just showing individuals how to make it work or an example. It could push us that much more into sort of this new phase of network operations or network development, or CI/CD pipelines, or the next individual guy, gal, they're going to make something way more efficient, way faster, way better, and that's incredible. I want to see that. I want to see
Yeah.
where the pitfalls, what I could have improved. That would be incredible to me. I want someone to make something better than this.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So if you were to kind of describe, so I'm gonna pull up that page for our, if
Oh yeah,
you're watching our
yeah.
YouTube, right? So if you were to describe like an overall 5,000 feet view of your CI/CD pipeline, what are the components that you include in that?
Sure. I'll just mention that pretty much everything from ngrok, the drone servers, runners, Batfish, all of that, all the way up to SuzyQ, that
Hmm.
is actually all just running off of a fairly basic Ubuntu VM.
Sure.
So just one machine. It's got some storage and a little bit of CPU and RAM, but nothing crazy.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. So GitHub, it's a popular place to store your code. I was already using it, so that just kind of made that decision fairly easy to me to
Hmm.
incorporate GitHub.
Yeah.
ngrok. I think you were wondering kind of like the use case for ngrok. So like, let's say
Sure.
I'm a developer, I'm a network engineer, I'm behind some kind of NAT, some basic home internet, and I don't have an easy way to sort of expose like a public URL out to
Yeah.
a service, right? So that's kind of where ngrok comes in. You sort of stand it up, then your machine or your terminal will essentially stand up a kind of secure connection to their service,
Hmm.
which will then sort of advertise a public URL that something could hit, and then it'll just be forwarded to your local machine. In
Yeah.
this case, I needed it for the drone server, which is local
Yeah.
to my setup. The drone is just the CI tool I chose to use. It kind of receives webhooks from your GitHub whenever you make changes to your code.
Sure.
Drone then essentially works with the runners to sort of run the jobs or the pipeline runs. And then Batfish again for pre-check validation. And we can go much deeper into this. This is very high level, but then
Sure. Yeah. Just a high
Batfish for
level.
pre-check validation. So essentially, if we want to make a change or if we want to validate our configurations, Batfish does a really good job of doing that all offline. It's very quick. It being offline, it's essentially just analyzing text and then building a model to sort of then you could ask questions against the Batfish service, and you can test all kinds of things like any errors, duplicate router IDs, or inconsistencies with routing protocols.
Right.
Nornir or Napalm, that's kind of like a natural choice for me. Again, a lot of these could be plugged in with something else. Like maybe you're a really big fan of Scrapply. You could use Scrapply at that phase. You could use
Hmm.
Ansible in that phase as well. And then SuzyQ. SuzyQ is kind of, I think, the newest sort of name that I've heard about.
Yeah.
They might be the newest overall, just as far as all these technologies mentioned.
Right.
That one was really fun just because sort of network engineering, kind of old school. We would kind of log into each device, run a bunch of show commands, check if the change we made was valid. I like SuzyQ because it's effective at doing post-check validations, but it also, even if you're not running it within a pipeline, it's a really
Yeah.
cool tool just to kind of check your network and kind of see what's going on. Are there any inconsistencies on your network? So yeah, really, really cool tools to work with, to be honest. I really enjoyed working with them all. But yeah, if you have any questions kind of in deep dives, I would more than happy to answer.
Yeah, for sure. So I think so I'm just going to paraphrase. So the CI CD pipeline. So CI stands for continuous integration, and CD stands for continuous deployment, right? Which right off the bat, we should probably separate the two. Continuous integration is just one thing. You don't need to have deployment associated with continuous integration. And I think what, as most network engineers, would probably start with just the integration part, right? So whatever you have on your local machine, your code base, your continuous integration goal is to push those onto the production. So to have whatever running after testing that it's valid, that's run in your production network, right?
Mm.
Yeah. So if I were to walk through the different components and their goals, is your GitHub is actually where it's a centralized code repository for you to store your code base. Um, and so let's just start with that. So if I were to, so what's the goal of Git and GitHub?
Sure. So there's a lot of players in this space. So there's Git, sort of the technology, and
Sure.
there's GitHub, which is essentially a service, right, that actually can store
Yeah.
all these repositories. But high level, it's a place where you can store your code and collaborate with others. So you can sort of get tracking and version history of any changes that have been done to your code base or your application. Using something like GitHub, it's really easy to track changes over time.
Hmm.
Folks can sort of contribute to your code. You can
Yep.
sort of do pull, manage pull requests and things of that nature. So it's very powerful. And even what I show in the blog is very limited to what GitHub can do. It was just a small subset of what's involved in that process. But yeah, essentially,
Right.
a network engineer or network operator out there could have its code base. They can modify their code locally, and they could push it up to their remote branch on GitHub, and
Right.
sort of update that. Which then, in the next phase, it would be there's a sort of an app listening, right, for changes in that repository.
Right. Right. So Git is the technology for synchronizing and collaborating your local code with remote code, but GitHub is a service that's actually the remote code to store for you, and it's related, closely related to Git, but it's not Git, right? So there's other Git based services or another code repository, but it doesn't have to be GitHub. So cool. So now you push that code to GitHub, and because GitHub is a service that they actually, like you said, they watches for that code change. So when that code change happens, what would they do in your CI pipeline?
Sure. So let's say you have your main code base, and it's got a main branch, right? That's like the
Right.
initial branch. But you want to make a change, you'd most likely make a like a test branch or a branch to add some kind of feature. In my case, in the post, I said, we're going to add descriptions to interfaces, right? So you might make a branch
Right.
that's called add interface description. From
Mm-hmm.
there, you make your changes. You'll push that up to GitHub.
Yep.
So now that branch exists in the GitHub service,
Yeah.
which it's essentially instructed to send a webhook to the ngrok URL,
Okay.
which is where the drone server is essentially listening to.
Right.
Because the drone, you essentially, when you instantiate drone, you connect it to your GitHub account, and it's sort of you activate. They call it activating repositories. Essentially, what repository should I be listening to or should I be watching, right?
Mm-hmm.
So once it sees that change, drone, we sort of define what they call it a drone.yaml file. Every tool has an example of these files, whether it's a Travis CI or GitLab. But essentially, you define the steps you want to perform when a change is seen in that repo.
Mm-hmm.
And these, mind you, I'm simplifying because these files can get fairly complex.
Sure.
I try to keep it fairly vanilla. So when it sees a branch change come in, it will stand up a runner, or they call it a drone runner. In this case, I made a Docker container myself that kind of includes any of the, and we'll get into that in a sec. Sorry, I'm kind of, folks might get lost there, but
That's okay.
kind of includes any of the requirements necessary to kind of speed up the runners. But
Sure.
when that happens, the drone.yaml files essentially defines what steps should be performed on a branch. So if it's not main, I should probably do the pre-checks. Let me check the files. Are they actually legitimate files?
Right.
Will there be any errors? So that's sort of the initial process. It won't actually make any changes because sort of in our file, we've defined that only, changes are only made in the main branch, which is in our case would be our production state.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's what happens when it's just a development branch, right? If let's say you probably wouldn't, you could make changes directly on main, but maybe you'd have some security where you can't make changes to main. But if you were making a change to main or doing a pull request, which is essentially we're going to add that branch into our main, right? We're sort of upstream, right?
Yeah.
Then the changes that are performed are a bit different. Everything that was done in dev is executed again, but in this case, we are actually going to deploy the changes. So that's kind of where Nornir and Napalm come in, and then after a change is done, we'll actually do post-check validation. Since we've actually made a change for the dev branch, there is no post-checks, right?
Yeah. So let's dive right into that ngrok role. So essentially, when GitHub, notice the change and it needs to notify somebody that because this is just continuous and it should be automated, it needs to notify somebody that to go do your thing, basically, right?
Right.
But
or
because
notify like, hey, a change has been made. You probably need to know about it, right?
right. So that is what you mentioned about a callback. So GitHub calls that a callback or webhook. well, they call it a webhook, and then that hook destination is a callback to say, something changed, just a notification. And because your drone server is a private IP address that cannot be reached by the public GitHub, that you need some kind
Exactly.
of public endpoint for it to talk to. So this could be like if you have a drone server that's has a public IP or probably DNS map to it, then you wouldn't need ngrok.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, maybe a much more advanced production instance. Yeah, you would have the resources to kind of enable that. You wouldn't
Yeah,
need the ngrok service, but I was a little bit of this was for the individual like me at home labbing in
yeah,
mind. So
for
for sort
sure.
of how can I simplify the process? And I can't even take credit for the ngrok piece. Actually, that came from the drone IO documentation. They actually
Right.
mentioned like, hey, if you're using GitHub, you need a public URL to hit. You can stand at the ngrok service, and there's other services like ngrok, but
Hmm.
it was very, very easy to set up. I mean, incredibly easy. It's amazing. You essentially, you download their image, you unzip it, you run it, and boom, you have a public URL. I mean, it's so fast. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, something else I should mention. Yeah, you did say that all these tools, for the most part, they're all open source. They're all free. So right there's very little. I wanted to sort of make it, what do they say, a low barrier of entry for
sure,
anyone, right? I mean,
sure.
besides maybe setting up an Ubuntu VM or running it off your machine, all the Docker containers, every piece is free, which is really awesome for folks that want to
Yeah,
get going.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I like ngrok, and I actually use it in production, like not
Yep.
in a production like that would impact customer kind of way,
Mhm.
but it just quickly spins up, like you said, a public URL so we could reach. So sometimes I need to like reboot I need to reboot like a smart switch basically, right? Then I would just do it at ngrok, and then so now I have a public URL for a somebody
Yep.
else's private network, so on.
Yeah.
But yeah,
The,
so
the,
ngrok actually, yeah, go ahead.
the thing folks should look out for, and I did mention it in the blog post, but when you activate ngrok, it sort of randomizes the URL. So if you were to
Right.
run this build, and if you were to stop it and rerun it, you're actually generating a new URL. So be mindful if you're sort of creating that OAuth application in GitHub, you're going to need to update that URL, right?
Yeah.
Like Eric mentioned, he might use it in a production instance. There's also, and don't have to pay for the service to run this is totally free, but there's also like paid versions where you can sort of reserve a domain. It could
Yeah.
be Eric .ngrok.io or something like that. But yeah, you
Yeah.
don't have to go that route at all. So you can stick
Yeah.
with free.
For sure, for sure. So that's your freemium. So the free portion is, I think, I don't know if you changed it, but it's like 2 concurrent sessions for your account, and then the dynamic URL that doesn't that gets changed every single time.
Right.
Um, yeah. So your ngrok, and it was simple to spin up. It provides a public endpoint. So GitHub noticed the change, and then actually notify drone server that something has happened. And you mentioned the drone server actually reads a configuration file in order to determine how many runners to spin and what kind of stuff they should do, right?
Yeah, there is. Yeah, even selecting drone. Honestly, I think I saw a presentation from Hank Preston, I think
Hmm.
from 2018, and it was actually a CI/CD presentation. It just so
Hmm.
happens in that presentation, I believe he was using drone, but it was drone from like
Okay.
2018. But I still figured, oh, well, let me check it out. I mean, Hank's using it. Let me just see what it's all about, and let me read some
Yeah, we all trust
documentation. And
Hank.
right, but to their credit, the documentation was incredible. Just standing it up was very simple. I definitely try to use tools that are simple to get going, but standing up drone was very easy to get going. Their documentation for how to install their runners, it was all Docker based. So I should get into that actually.
Okay.
Docker wasn't even a part of the initial sort of my, written down design of how this would work. I had never touched Docker, never even came close to making my own, Docker container, anything like that.
Right.
But when I started researching a lot of these tools, like all of them had a sort of an option to use Docker to sort of get going quickly with their service or their platform. So I
Right.
figured almost every single piece I'm using has a Docker variant. I should really
You're like,
take a look at this. I should
here
really,
it is.
right. Even getting Docker installed was non-trivial. I included instructions that I got from DigitalOcean, which they had a great write-up.
Yep.
So once you get that going, it's just a matter of using the instructions of that tool, and sort of you might have to substitute some variables, but you can get going relatively quickly. So I get drone up and the runners, and you're right. So they receive a change. The server then sort of stands up a runner. Since it's all Docker based, it's almost like Docker within Docker. It's pretty insane what's probably going on behind the scenes. Because the drone runner is a Docker container. When it's running the pipeline, it's actually standing up Docker containers. Depending on what images you select, that could be like a generic Python image, or it could be the one I uploaded to Docker Hub if folks want to use it, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'm not doing much maintenance on that. It was almost like a POC there, right? But I still use it when I'm executing this pipeline. But yeah, it was very awesome because it's very clean, right? It stands up this container, runs your pipelines, it's destroying it after. It leaves nothing to clean up. I did enjoy that, especially during testing. I was sort of testing so much that it kind of made sense. And I think even in drones documentation, they kind of recommend that you use the Docker runners. They have a couple other versions. I didn't dive into their other versions, but yeah, the Docker runner was more than enough for me.
Right. So for folks who are not familiar with containers, can you tell us a little bit about what they are and what they're kind of in a simplified form?
Yeah. So like, I guess we would have, traditionally you might have something like ESXi, and you might be setting up VMs, and sort of there's like a hypervisor, and then these VMs, they get assigned OSs and storage and CPU. Whereas Docker is almost like a little bit more of an abstraction from there, right? All your containers essentially share the what I call the base OS, right, or the main OS, and sort of only what's needed for your application is included in the container. This kind of makes the containers very efficient. Their startup time is incredibly fast.
Right.
Probably more stems from obviously having unused CPU cycles when you're sort of standing things up in the traditional sense of a VM, which is a Docker containers, or running multiple of them in one VM. They can kind of more efficiently use those processes. But yeah, it's almost like another layer of extraction from a VM standpoint, right? But it's packaging your app just for what it needs. The benefit there being is kind of the whole like, it worked on my machine type thing. I don't know what's going on with your machine. Whereas in Docker, it's incredibly safe to share what you've built, and it'll just work, right? But that's really kind of the goal there. It's really, really fantastic, and my journey about just working with it was really fun. I'm sure there'll be more to come on that front.
Yeah, I think it's safe to share because it destroys everything afterwards, right? Like, so as you mentioned, Docker is like little VMs that you just spin up. I mean, there's some catch to it, so it's not full virtualization where you're able to install like Windows on Ubuntu servers. So your little Docker, images and runners are subsets of your base OS, but the benefit is you spin it up so fast, and you're able to separate one runner from the other, or the mother from the child, or children processes. Then you spin it up really fast and do a good separation. Once you're done, you just wipe it clean, and then you don't get into a race condition or any kind of messiness, because you have to keep state.
Right.
State is just gone.
Right.
You're just gone. You assume every single Docker container is built from the ground up and fresh, which is a lot of things to get tripped over, essentially, because you're actually thinking about if you're coming from like an OS world like me, then when you go into a Docker world, you're not thinking about like the base level, like install requirements, and then you got to specify Python version first, right? Like you did this in your blog. I think it was either the second or the third. You start specifying like Python version, install requirements, copy code here to this folder, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it was again going back to, I thought the time to execute the pipelines when I was sort
Yeah.
of using a generic Python Docker image, it took a lot of time because I had to install a fair amount of dependencies. That
Right.
kind of
You
led
mentioned that.
that kind of led me down the road of like, wow, could I create my own image? Like, what would that include? And I just just as anyone, did my research and looked up some instructions. And mine was very simple, right? I could base my Docker image off of one that was already created. In my case, that was a Python 3 Slim variant, which keeps the Docker image fairly small.
Right.
Uh, Once I got that running, it was just if I could see an example where they were sort of copying, a requirements file over to the Docker container, building the container, it installs those requirements, and it was all sort of encapsulated in this one image. It was kind of cool at the end to sort of see it run so fast on the
Yeah.
pre-checks. It was really, it was that aha moment for me. I was like, wow, like this is the power. Like that is incredible.
You were sold.
Yeah, I was definitely sold. Definitely sold. But yeah, it was really cool technology. And yeah, I should mention the drone and the drone.yaml file when it's executing these steps.
Right.
You could define multiple steps. I believe every step actually is executing on its own Docker container. So every step, if you will, is isolated. So let's
Hmm.
say in step, in this step, if I were to install some Python library, and then I had a second step right after it, and I tried to use it, I don't believe they would necessarily. Actually, believe they're isolated. So you have to be careful with your requirements
Right.
when building something like this.
Right.
Anyway,
So
I just
some
threw it
of
in there
them
just in
are
case someone might run into that issue. But yeah,
right. You're hedging your bets and say, hey, there's the warning, right? Fair
yeah,
warning right
yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
I
yeah.
think, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. Cut you
No,
off
no,
there.
no, no. Please go ahead.
And I tried to any place in the series where I kind of felt like maybe I wasn't explaining something as efficiently as I could, or as in a simple manner. I do try to point individuals to the actual documentation
Hmm.
for these different toolings, just in case maybe that would be beneficial. Just go straight to the source, right?
Right. Right. No. So no, definitely. So um and you illustrate it in your diagram, right? So there's certain tasks that are done parallel, like in different Docker containers, but there's certainly tasks that you have to do serially, right? Like you want to do your pre-check, and then you want to do your deployment, and then you want to do your post-check. But
Right.
there's some stuff that could be done parallelly, like maybe coding style check, like you listed, you're using Black code style and so on. Um, and then of course the other piece was the speed, where you eventually made your own image, which you documented in all of your steps on initially how long it took and how many
Mhm.
steps it took. And then once you made your own image, where you just pull it out from somewhere, again, it's an iterative process. You pull it out from your Docker hub, and then that image was stored over there, and made it so much faster because it was pre-built.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was, out of all the steps, I think that was one of the biggest, if not the biggest, like performance gain for the whole pipeline. Uh,
Yeah. And I
Definitely.
think I want to also mention, like, all of these technology, like drones or ngrok or GitHub or Docker, they're all reusable, right? These are very uh, transferable knowledge. So it's not like you
Mhm.
just learn all of these and it's only applies to your CI pipeline. This could be used for your entire career basically. And if something new comes out, then you just kind of swap that with that. Like,
Yeah,
maybe you want to use
something simple like
Kubernetes.
something simple like, let's say maybe you're small company, enterprise, whatever. Maybe you want to use Netbox or Notabot or some tool like that. They have a Docker image. They have steps to stand that up. So right, learning
Right.
something like this is definitely beneficial for things not even included in this pipeline, right? Like something like a source of truth or some kind of inventory management system. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
For sure. Yeah. So, like, essentially, if you have your source repository, somewhere else, then all you just have to swap that out. But you still could use ngrok. You could use the drone. You could use the runners. You could use Docker containers, and all of
definitely,
that.
definitely. And I
So,
didn't want to build this so people to say like this is the, oh, I should make it just like this. Like, no way. Everything's interchangeable. Whatever you're
right,
comfortable with, use that. That's great.
right. But but Julio actually had worked it out. So like if you pick all the pieces that he used, then chances are you have a very high chance of success rate versus, if you just go out and research on yourself, your own,
Yeah.
then you might, hit some walls. All
Yeah,
right, cool.
definitely.
So now we're on the second part of your diagram, right? So now we have the drone runners, and now we're ready to do what? Like pre-check?
Yeah. So one of the first steps you mentioned it was black code formatting. That's actually just done straight on the runner.
Okay.
That's very sort of that was almost like a nicety to get folks thinking of sort of a code style and what's possible.
Mm-hmm.
Black is just a really popular tool to sort of, I believe it runs on the PEP 8 standard, and
Mm-hmm.
it's very hardcore on its styling rules. So sort of if you're writing Python and if it should reformat it or not, it's either a yes or no, right? There's
Yeah.
no argument, right? So if your team says
Right.
we're going to use black as our style, that's it. That there's no decisions to be made after that, right? We're just so the
Right.
check is just again researching like, oh, can I do a black check and it actually call a failure on a pipeline run, because before it was just saying, hey, all your code is great, or hey, 2 files would be changed, but it still passed, right? So
Right.
black has a really simple dash check option, I believe it's what it is, and it'll actually trigger a failure on the pipeline. I'm
Got
guessing it
it.
just registers a bad exit code.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that was that step. Then it was Batfish. So
Okay.
Batfish was really cool.
Okay.
I believe I saw something with Rick Donato or someone either on YouTube or writing about Batfish. And initially, this is what I thought. I just thought it analyzed security policies or ACLs, or that's all I thought that it actually did. Just being naive or not researching it myself.
Sure.
But I sort of saw it come up a lot, and they had a lot of documentation or in blog posts just around that pre-check validations, how they work with Batfish, and again just figured, well, let me look into it, and lo and behold, there's Docker steps to get the service running.
Right.
It's very very simple to get started. Um, After that, yeah, using so I should step back a little. The pipeline is great and it's
Sure.
created, but usually when I'm testing these things, it's usually from my machine because I'm trying to iterate very very quickly,
Mm-hmm.
versus like keep restarting a pipeline or keep rechecking in code to wait for the pipeline. I'm usually doing some type of local development on my laptop where I can just talk to the Batfish service directly and sort of get that quick feedback loop. Um, but
Right.
Batfish has a lot of, and this is probably just to show you my lack of experience even with Python, right? There's this concept of like unit testing and test driven development, but that's a phase in my career where I still have a lot, I still have a long way to go. But leveraging something like Batfish, where they've they don't connect to devices. It essentially uses a snapshot being just a folder of configuration files. That's all it is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
When you write a Python script to interact with Batfish, it's essentially sending. It all stays local, right? There's no connections outbound or anything like that. It essentially sends these configurations to the Batfish service. Once it has that service, when you
Mm-hmm.
use your Python script, you're essentially just querying the service to get these answers. So it's relatively quick. It's all offline. There's no connections to devices. I thought that was really great for this whole pre-check concept of not making changes to the network. At this point, we're not even connecting to the network. I thought that was really cool.
Right. 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 Right.
But when it builds this model, you could ask all kinds of questions, and even what I've included is just a taste. That just shows you, like you mentioned with Python, there's just there's a whole another level, right? Even if you just get started, there's the ceiling is just non-existent, right? What I included is just like a tiny taste of even what Batfish can do.
Right.
Eventually, I found they had these function called assertion helpers, I believe they're called. I can't recall. I wrote the blog post. I already forgot. but
Well, that's
the
even more reason
assertion,
to go read the blog post.
yeah. The assertion helpers, if you will, they're essentially checks that their team has already written that will just analyze a lot of that data for you. So you definitely could go out and build this yourself, or try. That would be a monumental effort versus taking advantage of an open source tool and being able to leverage that really quickly. Yeah, and like Eric's showing here, you could check for duplicate router IDs, incompatible BGP sessions, OSPF sessions, and it's really extensive. Like the OSPF checks, it might just say it's doing an OSPF check, but it's probably checking network types, MTU mismatches. Are they on the same network, right? Like all the standard checks for OSPF neighbor relationships. Like it's doing all of that in just one function call versus, myself, log into device, get MTU, compare with neighbor, is it matching,
Right.
something like that, right? You
Right.
can totally do that. But I really wanted to leverage these tools and just see the benefit I could get out of them, and just kind of show individuals that with not very much, and I mean, even in the test script, there's really not that many lines. I mean, it might be like 40 lines of code. Like it's very powerful. All the checks that are already being performed. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think you touched on the two important features of Batfish. One is there's no there's no querying the device, right? Like just the models are built from static configuration files, and
Mm-hmm.
then there's a bunch. The second important point was once you built that, there's a bunch of questions like the assertion helpers that
Mm-hmm.
you alluded to, that they already pre-build these checks, like if you have duplicated IP address, if you have BGP sessions that are not complete, or like
Mm-hmm. Yep.
incompatible or something like that,
Exactly.
so that you could do a stateless check on your functions. And I'm gonna go ahead and also put in a link in the show notes on this blog post published by Rotul and Dinesh, so the
Yep.
founders of Batfish and
Yep.
Susie Q, on why the decision that choices I made. I think I actually got the link from your blog post.
Yeah,
Or
it
yeah,
should be in there. I got
yeah,
the chance to speak to both of them. Eric mentioned,
nice,
kind of that fear of diving into open source and going through this process. I was really surprised and excited that the folks that are building this, right, they're putting a lot of time and effort into this one, to help the community and sort of
right,
make us better as a whole. They
right,
are more than happy to answer questions, to offer assistance. I think there's sort of a joy in them to sort of what they have built to see individuals use it. And I
mm-hmm.
found that really cool that they even, reached out to me just if I had any questions, or if they could provide any clarity, if maybe I was running into issues. So I'm sure they would echo that they're totally open to answering any questions you might have. Like, very helpful individuals for sure.
Yeah. Well, little teaser is I'll have both of them on the show at different point in time in the future. Yeah. So
I didn't know that.
so good advertisement. And swear to God, we didn't talk about this beforehand, but yeah, actually, Ratul, like Batfish is actually just down the not right down the street, but they're in downtown Seattle, right? So
Right.
so they're fairly close, and Dinesh, I should talk to him before as well. So cool, like I'm sure they're very happy with the new publicity, but two really cool individuals for sure. So
Something I should go
yeah,
into that I
of
didn't
course,
go into very deeply in the post, only because there was this balance of what to include, like what is too much. Something like infrastructure as code, that could have probably been its own blog post, if not multiple blog posts. I mean, so much
for
so
sure.
that I actually linked a fellow network engineer. I think he has like a 3 to 5 part blog series just on infrastructure as code.
Hmm.
Um, so this comes from when I was thinking about working with Batfish. There's this whole concept of, well, you have to provide it the snapshot. Well, the snapshot
Hmm.
could either be the config file that's just the raw text file. It either you had a backup script and it collected these your configurations or your running configs, and you can sort of feed that into Batfish. There's
Yeah.
another concept of using something like YAML files or some type of way to define your infrastructure, and then sort of use maybe like a Jinja template to build that
Right.
running configuration. And then you could then feed that into Batfish. I didn't go too deep into that because there was maybe the whole 3 blog posts in a day thing, but that's a big concept that folks should definitely look into. And especially if you're going to sort of, more production or bigger scale, right? You're going to need some type of way to kind of define your infrastructure versus just maybe just raw text files, kind of like I did, as far as my showing you how it works.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a real challenge, right? So because Batfish, I mean, if you're looking at multiple device configuration files, then you have to put them together into your own model. But
Mhm.
for a cloud provider, for example, for AWS, which builds all of their infrastructure from cloud formation, or maybe there's some sort of Terraform tie-in that could build
Yep.
your whole infrastructure, there's no configuration to read from. You just have this configuration file, or build template basically. So
Right, right, right.
if you have those two, then I do believe Batfish actually supports that today, to do
I
look
believe
at
I
cloud
believe they do as
formation.
well. I believe they do as well. Um,
Yeah. So cool. You have your Batfish, does you checked, and no duplicate IDs, no your OSPF is
yeah,
kosher. Then you're trying to push that out, right? So what do you use to push that configuration out?
yeah. Let me mention one thing. So
Yeah, for sure.
Batfish does its best to sort of validate the configuration file as something. Can I read this file? Can I sort of build a model from this?
Hmm.
But I noticed you can sort of have dummy data in there, and it would still go through the Batfish checks and perform all that just fine. In the blog, I actually included sort of a totally fake configuration within a router's config.
Yeah.
And then something new with the tools in the next phase with Nornir and Napalm. Napalm actually has a Napalm configure task, which you can but you can do a dry run. Essentially, it won't, it'll sort of, hey, is this going to be legitimate?
Hmm.
But it'll just do a check. It won't actually sort of like an Ansible dry check or dry run, I think Ansible calls it. It won't
Yeah.
actually make checks. But in this case, when doing that, it'll actually error out if the config file is not valid, which I thought was a really simple, quick step to add with little to no work. I mean, you saw I added some parser arguments, and it's either I do dry run, no dry run
Hmm.
to do the pre-check. Yeah, but I should talk about Nornir Napalm a bit more. Is when working with network devices in Python, Nornir is almost. I mean, to me, right? I'm just the user here. It just
Sure.
seems like a natural option to choose, right? It's a Python framework
Yep.
for networking. Probably Linux machines as well, but essentially it deals with a lot of kind of what Ansible deals with, right? Like the host file, host variables, group variables. It does a nice job of keeping that in one package, but it's also very extensible, right? There's a lot of plugins, whether you're using Napalm or Scrapply. Pick your flavor, whichever tool you like, but you can sort of plug those into Nornir and build pretty sophisticated scripts, but not too much code. Like again,
Hmm.
even this script to actually do the deploy, it's very small. It's doing a few imports that are fairly standard imports in Nornir. You can kind of see examples in their documentation,
Right.
and yeah, it's great. It's fast. It's easy to work with. Initially, I'll be honest. When a while back when I first got into Nornir, there's kind of there's functions all over the place. You're doing a lot of imports. You're like, oh my gosh, that's like I'm already lost in the sauce. I don't know what's going on.
Right. Right.
But yeah, as you make your scripts a lot more advanced, yeah, you're most likely going to have more imports, more jobs running. Again, this one it's very limited imports, very simple inventory. But yeah, the decision there again, yeah, it was not too hard because I was only dealing with 4 nodes.
Yeah.
Probably not a big deal what I chose, right? I could have done something like a Scrapply script that would have been totally
Yeah.
fine. Or
Sure.
I think you could have had Ansible do this step if you wanted.
Yeah.
Maybe it would still be using the Napalm modules, but yeah. Um, if you have any questions, please send them my way. But really cool tool.
Yeah, no, I think I will echo that sentiment about initially Nornir was more geared toward people who are familiar with coding. So
Mhm.
they give you the classes, they give you the examples, but later on, like Nornir as is right now, is actually being broken down pretty modular. So you could pick different drivers, like how you talk to the device, and you could pick your
Mhm.
drivers that way. And they also take as you alluded to, they're no pun intended, right? They a play from a playbook out of Ansible where they specify all your group variables, host variables into a YAML format, and then
Mhm.
just by default, they make sensible decisions on which file to pull it from. So that I think that was part 4 of your blog post where you listed out exactly on the files that you put your inventory file, which is because they're in YAML format, it's a little bit better as far as readability and for people who are,
Right.
like us network engineers reading a file versus like a developer reading code.
Right. It's kind of like if you make this yeah, a JSON file, right? It's not too much
Yeah.
different, but even that little difference it might throw someone off, right? I wasn't too sure, right? But yeah, keeping it in YAML, it does make it extremely readable. Yeah, at least it's easy on the eyes, I would say for sure.
All right, cool. So you got your runners. You did your black, coding check validation. There was a pre-check with Batfish. Now you're pushing things. You're everything's good. Now you're able to push things out with Nornir. And now the devices change. I assume the changes are made, but we don't assume, right? We're in the automated CI line. So what do we use
Right.
for checking for validate the post
Yeah.
change?
For this instance, I went with Suzy Q.
Mm-hmm.
Again, yeah, totally new to me. Just kind of a project by Dineshta and others.
Right.
Um,
I don't think this was included in Hank's CI pipeline originally, right?
I don't believe so. You
Okay.
mean from like 2018?
Yeah, because
No,
Suzy Q is
no.
actually kind of new.
Yeah, I think it's super new. I think it might have started in 2020. I think.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, again, right? There's a way to stand it up with Docker. Some things that I just kind of had to work with was creating an inventory file.
Okay.
When speaking with some of the devs, there's actually work going on to sort of make it a little bit more dynamic to create the inventory. Right now, it's kind of either manual or maybe you write a script to maybe you keep your host inventory somewhere and it's sort of you can build an inventory file that's compatible with SuzyQ. But there's kind of
Yeah.
work going down to sort of uh, you know something like a netbox or Notabot or something like that to generate your host file. But basically,
Sure.
getting long-winded here. SuzyQ has this Polar service. The
Yeah.
Polar, essentially, you stand it up, you give it a inventory of what
Mm-hmm.
devices should I be checking,
Right.
and the Polar, it just in a sequence, I think it's every like 60 seconds by default. It'll
Okay.
just connect to devices and just start gathering just tons of data, tons of data.
Yeah.
And I believe only if there's really changes, sort of the data will stay the same. If it sees a change, it'll sort of update those time slots of a change has been seen, right?
Right.
But that's essentially always running. This was a little tricky to get going. I will be honest, but it's more of a benefit to write this blog post just so the next person could have that much of an easier process to get it going. But essentially, when you stand up the container, you sort of make a connection between um, storage on the container and storage on the host machine. So it's essentially
Mm-hmm.
writing files to both locations.
Right.
Then when you're using something like a Python script, you build a SuzyQ config file, right? Where you point it to the data, like where is the data stored? Where's the data that I can actually query and run my Python scripts against?
Yeah.
Similar to Batfish, except Batfish, it's like you could tell it a remote node, but SuzyQ, it almost like it has to be local um,
Okay.
to the machine you're actually interacting with, right? There's not like a
Okay.
remote connection thing going on.
Okay.
Once that happens, you can write your post checks, which is then just checking the data that SuzyQ has essentially pulled over time.
Yeah.
Now, there's a thought process there of what if you run the pipeline and the SuzyQ poller hasn't sort of done its recheck after your change. That is
Sure.
a valid point. I think it's a question I had. Some things to get around that is you could sort of modify the times that SuzyQ can pull, right? Maybe you
Okay.
lower that down to every 30 seconds, right? Besides the default 60 seconds. That's a
Mm-hmm.
thought. Maybe there's a pause in your pipeline run on the post checks. Maybe it waits. I didn't see anything as a way where you can query SuzyQ as like, hey, have you rechecked the network essentially, right? I didn't see that, but maybe that's in there, right? I just don't know. But there's sort of a thought process of you should wait for it to actually query the new data or gather the new data, so then what you're actually querying or checking is is the valid new information for your network.
Yeah, I think maybe they're kind of under the I should say the ideology of eventual consistency. So it's just this continuous process that always gets run in the background.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's true that there may be inconsistency in between, but eventually they'll be consistent and
Yeah.
so on.
And something that's really cool is even if you were doing your post checks and they're all green, they're all great, that's fine. Since the service is running, you could, and I did an example, you can connect to the SuzyQ CLI, which is essentially just you connect into the Docker container, you run SuzyQ CLI, then
Mhm.
you have access to all of the data it's just recently pulled, and you can very quickly just start asking a bunch of networks. They've created a lot of commands where you could essentially just start asking any question you want, like what are my devices, are they alive,
Right.
what
Right.
routes do I have, who owns a route, like just and it's up to your what they've created and a little bit up to your imagination of like what's important to you, right? What's important to me might be more, something else might be more important to you in your
Yeah.
environment.
Right.
It's really fascinating. So I liked SuzyQ in that you can use it in this pipeline, but you could also just jump into it just to check your network almost whenever you want.
Yeah. Yeah, you post in the example of a SuzyQ CLI where they just treat the network as one entity, right? Like they don't
Yeah,
care if it consists of two spines and four leaves or two
yeah,
devices. They just treat it as a whole entity, and it's almost like a like big switch network where they treat that you have a abstraction CLI that you do a show ver, but they say show ver all, then all of
mm.
the versions comes back versus just one or two devices, which is really cool.
I will say the network I made for this was very simple, but I kind of wanted to get the idea of to show you how these tools work. I didn't really care about how the network looked. It could have been as basic as humanly possible. It didn't matter.
Hmm.
But to counter argument, I could have made it a little bit more complex and kind of probably asked a little bit more complex questions like, equal cost multipath, do I have multiple
Yeah.
paths to this destination? Things like that. The way I built it
Right.
now, it's just, A to Z, it's one path all the way. So the
Right.
questions I could ask were pretty limited, but again, I think I kind of got the idea across of like kind of what is possible with this tool.
No, absolutely. It's one of the most interesting part about Suzy Q is you're able to leverage all of these and not very much cost to you, right? you spin up a Docker container, you specify a few Polar files, and off you go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess for me it was free, right?
Yeah,
And for anyone else, right?
free,
Anyone else?
free as in beer, I guess, and you could.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but you obviously spend your time and your energy and your time to write this post to benefit the community.
Right, right. I mean, it was a learning experience for me too, right? I wanted to see if it was possible, right? Can I put these
Right.
pieces together, right? The pieces to the puzzle. Then just giving that to the community or showing my learnings. I think that was also a factor in the back of my head. Like, I want to get this out. Like, that would be really awesome to show individuals like what's possible. Um,
Right.
yeah. So that was,
Right.
yeah, it was really fun.
I think you've achieved that. So um, I think we've covered all the major pieces, and I don't think we missed anything. Is there anything you want to add? Maybe something that you thought
Um,
of after we talked?
no, I mean, I think I've kind of alluded to, I think the pieces I chose here, I had a
Yeah.
really great time using them. I think they have really good documentation. But, if you're totally set on using something, go ahead and use that. If you don't want to use GitHub and you have a self-contained GitLab or something like that, go all in. That's great. That's
Yeah.
totally great. Feel free to use that.
Cool. So it's great. I want to congratulate you again for writing the 6-part post and getting a lot of feedback, right? From what I could tell, people really
Yeah.
liked it. People really enjoyed it. So what's just as a final thought, after you roll all these, you publish, you never know who's going to read it, but apparently there's a lot of good feedback. So can you tell us, what are your final thoughts about this whole process? Was it worth it? And what did it mean to
Yeah.
you?
I think the learning process was probably one of the most important. I mean, I learned a lot a lot when doing something like this. And that
Hmm.
sort of concept of, teaching someone something, you sort of have to sort of you're relearning it, or putting it into words of something that would make sense to someone out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I did my best to try to make that happen. Be easy on my English. I'm sure there's a bunch of grammatical errors in there. I'm sure every writer, they see something and they're like, oh my goodness, look at that. But
I didn't see any,
um,
but
the support I got from the community was absolutely incredible. Just the comments, the likes. I see all of that, and I appreciate you guys, because as a someone just trying to contribute to the community, yet you never know what's going to happen, right? Folks
yeah.
might totally say it's terrible, or whatever, right? But everyone has been very supportive in the whole process, right? So I really appreciate that, and it kind of like helps you kind of keep going, right? Because a lot of these posts, it's just me, myself, and I. Or it might be Eric just sitting in his office writing his book. There's no one there, telling
No,
me to
it's a
keep
very
going.
lonely process, man.
I might show my wife like, oh my God, this is so awesome. Look what I just did. And she'll say, she'll be like, ah, it's so cool.
Yeah, she smiled
Uh,
politely and then went about her
yeah.
business.
Yeah. So just to get the interaction with the community, I think was really, really cool. And I hope folks out there, they explore, they either build this or build their own, and let me know, send me a photo or something of your pipeline runs, tag me. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Julio, it's been a pleasure. I really enjoy our conversation. I think it's the first time we talked, but it feels like we could continue this conversation on much longer, but and I'm sure we will. But thanks again for being on the show. Really appreciate it. And good job on the uh on the 6-part blog post. Do you want to tell people where they could find you on social media?
Yeah. You can probably see my name there at Julio_PDX. You can find me on LinkedIn too. Mostly active a lot on Twitter. But yeah,
Okay.
thank you, Eric. Thank you for putting this together. Thank you for, being a cool member of the community. So keep going, and I appreciate it. And just everyone out there. Yeah. Don't be afraid to try new things. Don't be afraid of failure. I failed a lot during this build, a whole lot. And yeah, I try to show you some of it, but there's way more. There's a lot of failure in there. So.
Oh, dude, you and I both, man. Yeah, for sure, for sure. It's just what people look at the final product, but the process is always messy, and lots of interesting trial and errors for sure.
Yeah, definitely. No, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks again for being on the show. And I want to thank you guys for listening to the Network Automation Nerds podcast today. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other podcast platforms. Until next time, bye bye. And thanks again, Julio. Bye bye.